Hey everyone, I'm NB. Welcome if you're new and welcome back if you're not. I like psychology. I also like Genshin Impact. So why not psychoanalyze Genshin Impact? I'm going to be talking about a take that's been taken but not explained in depth from what I've seen. So I'm going to be talking about albedo and how he may be neurodivergent coded to be autistic. Keep in mind that I am not a psychologist and this is not confirmed. Section 1. Social life, or lack thereof. Let's start with the obvious. Albedo doesn't like socializing. This isn't to say he doesn't like people. He does, as shown through his relationships with Sucrose or Clear, even Alice. But it's evident that he finds it tiring. When talking about socializing in his voice lines, he says that relationships are troublesome and he finds maintaining relationships taxing. He speaks very formally, which could be his kind of scientific writing, something he's interested in, bleeding into his dialogue. That could be a stretch, though. Socializing is something that tends to be difficult for autistic people because the way they think and thus speak develops differently than that of neurotypical people. There's also the fact that their interpretation of neurotypical people may be different. It can be difficult to understand body language, tone, or facial expressions. That feeling can also be mutual, as autistic people may show different body language, tone, and you get the point. Essentially, at its worst, it can feel as though the two people are speaking different languages, depending on how surface level their interpretation of the other person speaking is. Autism can also make one anxious about new experiences, and speaking to a stranger is always a new experience. And considering albedo's affiliation with the Knights of Favonius, he would commonly have to communicate with strangers if he weren't in his lab in Dragonswine as much as he is. Section 2. Fear of rejection. This is more of a branch off the first section, and it's about fear of rejection. This is perhaps a bit of a stretch, as this is solely based on one voice line, but it felt somewhat serious. In his voice line, Something to Share unlocked upon Friendship Level 4, he says, "There's something I've always wanted to ask you, but feared rejection and disappointment, for asking about Paimon." Research has shown that autism can be linked to RSD, or rejection-sensitive dysphoria. This causes anxiety in relation to the possibility of rejection. He was scared that the traveler would react badly to his inquiry, so bad that he waited for them to be pretty close to ask, despite having wanted to ask since, well, taking his words literally, since he met the traveler. He doesn't seem to comment on this in any of his other voice lines. He may have in an event dialogue, but I'm not looking through all of that. And the degree of which he went to make sure that he wouldn't be rejected for asking such a simple and understandable question makes me think that this is a normal thing. Studies have shown that around half of all autistic people have high levels of anxiety, whether it be situational or just generally, and thus this could be a trait of autism, social anxiety, general anxiety, or some combination between the three. Again, I could be overthinking this, but it's a big possibility. Section 3. Special interests. Autistic people have special interests. They could develop in childhood or much later. Their special interests may be a part of media, like a video game or a show or a hobby. Albedo has shown two things that could easily qualify as special interests: alchemy and painting. These two things are the things we see him do the most, and most of his voice lines are in relation to one of the two. In his character teaser, Sucrose says, "Just like always, overly passionate about what piques your interest, yet completely indifferent towards anything otherwise." This is an experience many autistic people have. It's easy for them to learn something or be interested in something if it's in relation to one of their special interests or hyperfixations, and it's more difficult otherwise. He shows both talent and skill in alchemy and often uses it as a conversation starter, which is something many autistic people do, intentionally or not, with their special interests. His closest friend is Sucrose, whom shares one of his special interests. This one is definitely one of the more obvious ones. Alchemy and art are just such huge parts of his identity. Section 4. Hyperfixations. I actually didn't notice this one at first, and it took me a hot minute to realize it. However, in my haste, I found evidence for this, and then completely lost it. Oops. I have a much smaller piece of evidence for this one, but it's like the bigger one just disappeared. Despite my mistake, I will continue to make this point. Albedo enjoys asking questions about the world and its science and then answering them. However, once they're answered, he completely loses interest in them. This bears resemblance to hyperfixations. Essentially, someone becomes hyper-focused on something for any given amount of time. It could be days, weeks, months, or even years, and it takes up a lot of their focus and occasionally can accidentally be prioritized over genuine self-care. In Albedo's character teaser, Sucrose says, "Your swing in interest didn't even leave you long enough to finish this painting." This is implying that he often has, as Sucrose puts it, swings in interest, which again is a term that is very similar to hyperfixations in meaning. Section 5. Facial expressions. From what I've seen from autistic people talking about their experience as autistic people, many autistic people don't have much expressional variation. This rings true for albedo for sure. He generally has a very neutral look, and when taking pictures with him out, his looks are disappointed and pensive, and neither of which really alter his facial expressions all that much. This could be part of why he finds social situations tiring. Neurotypical people generally are more expressive and are very focused on expression, whereas it may not hold the same weight for neurodivergent people. This section is smaller and is more a little thing I noticed, but it definitely works with the other traits to create this theory. Section 6. Alexithymia. Now you might be thinking, NB, what the hell is Alexa whatever? This video is about autism. Yeah, it is. Cool your tits and work with me for a second. Alexithymia is essentially low cognitive empathy. It hinders one's ability to recognize and understand emotions within themselves and others. It can present difficulties both internally and externally because it makes it harder to know your own emotions as well as how other people are feeling. People with low empathy tend to be driven by logic and want to find it wherever they can for familiarity and comfort, but emotions are anything but logical and thus present difficulty. This condition is closely related to autism, as around half of autistic people have it. This has created a huge stigma around autism that affects everyone with autism regardless of whether they have been diagnosed with low empathy or not. However, let me clarify. Low empathy does not mean no feelings. It doesn't mean you don't care about other people. It means you have difficulty understanding emotions, and that's it. Full stop. Albedo seems to have difficulty with emotions and understanding them and often asks questions about other people in his voice lines, implied or outright stated. He also seems to be unsure of his understanding of other people's motivations, regardless of how close they are to him. While this is a shot in the dark with how little his emotions are discussed, I can definitely see him as having alexithymia, considering how logical he is in his thinking and how little he understands other people and their emotions. Section 7. So, good representation? Well, this is a great question. My answer? It's up for interpretation. Wow, how helpful I'm being. I'm so helpful. Yay! Anyways, those generally when autism is represented in media, it's highly intelligent men with science-related special interests and little tolerance for socializing due to it being tiring for them. Sound familiar? However, there are a lot of nuances to this character, and although it may have been unintentional, lots of autistic people immediately saw this, even after only seeing his trailer. I just don't feel like we have enough to know. I tried looking at all his animations and there wasn't really enough to see any stims or self-stimulatory behavior, except for maybe adjusting his clothing, I guess. So I'll let others be the judge. I'm indecisive anyways. Thank you to people who have seen this before me and have given me a gateway to make a video on this topic. You are the real ones, even if you don't know I exist. So yeah, thank you for watching. I'm trying a new direction in videos and I'd love to do more of these. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, then feel free to like and subscribe, and I will try to make similar content soon. If you'd like to see me analyze any other Genshin Impact characters, then comment them down below and we shall see. Goodbye!